The relief, frankly, that the country can now move on from the Southport killings, and Starmer's statement today that the country had failed in its duty to protect the victims of Axel Rudakabana, who today pleaded guilty to the killing of the small children, and the the news which is coming through that Axel Rudakabana revealed that he was on the has been revealed as being on the radar of the counter extremist officials. This vile and sick teenager, I think Starmer called him. Britain will rightly demand answers, and we will leave no stone unturned in the pursuit. The tragic events surrounding the Southport killings, this moment of profound national trauma, as Axel Rudakabani's guilty plea means that the three innocent children, Bebby King, Elsie Dot Stankham, and Alex de Silva Aguar, have now some semblance of justice. But it also casts a harsh light on the failures in safeguarding and the failures of the system, and the and this sort of pattern of secrecy that seems to surround events like this, and it gives license to people like Farage to say we've been denied the truth. Well, we haven't been denied the truth. The truth was being pursued, and it's not our right. We don't have a right to all these truths. What we have a right to is to be protected. And the problem is that because we were not protected, we also don't have the truth. You know, we're falling at both hurdles. And what I found so extraordinary about the story is that the children, the children who were killed, follows an obsession by Axel Rudakabani with investigating and researching killings on the school computers, and that he was twice caught viewing material which was inappropriate and worrying. And from my point of view, I often want to see things in a sort of in a more moral dimension, and this fits in very much with the medieval idea of possession. That people who are possessed often begin by expressing an interest in a dark in dark issues, and then they become obsessed. The spirits gather round them, and then they become possessed. And the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper's announcement of a public inquiry is an acknowledgement of the state's grave failure to uphold its ultimate duty to protect the most vulnerable. It didn't manage to do that. And the inquiry must now unravel how a teenager with a documented history of red flags, a history of violence, referrals to the Prevent program, a known interest in extremism, could evade effective intervention for so long. And Rudakabana's case is chilling not only for the heinous crime he committed, but also for the warning signs that seem to have gone unheeded between 2019 and 2021, in fact, even going back to 2017. And it's essential to have answers, says Starmer, and I don't know. I don't know whether it is essential to have answers or whether it is essential to have the truth. This sounds very much like the crusade of Tice and Farage. But it is essential to know why the authorities that had these signs that knew about these problems way back didn't act. And so allow Rudakabana, armed with a knife, consumed by a fascination with violence, to systematically attack children as young as 6, leaving 3 dead and more physically and emotionally scarred. And in the days that followed, the nation united in grief, but also in anger. And the anger at the lapses that have allowed a young man obsessed with death and violence to walk into a dance studio and devastate lives. We need to know. We need to know why that wasn't acted upon. Why that was allowed. Anger at the misinformation and the far-right exploitation at the tragedy. We need to know how that was allowed and how that occurred, because that was about filling a vacuum and sparking the unrest, inflaming social divisions. That is about filling a vacuum. And that is an area where a public inquiry must answer questions. And Sir Keir Starmer, in his statement, encapsulated the nation's sentiment. Britain will rightly demand answers. Yes, but not the same answers that were being asked by Farage and Tice and Robinson. Those aren't the answers. And in fact, Farage, Tice and Robinson were actually proposing solutions. They were proposing the answers. And those answers seemed to be wrong. But in a vacuum, the empty vessels make the most noise. Actually, in a vacuum, you don't hear any noise at all. What a ridiculous thing for me to say. But Farage filled that void with noise. A void, not a vacuum. Filled the void with noise because it was empty. And Starmer stresses the state's failure to do its duty to protect these young girls, and he promised that no stone would be left unturned. Absolutely. Well, I hope that also includes how the right was able to hijack this story and this tragedy. This inquiry, Starmer suggests, must not merely scrutinise the past, but must serve as a catalyst for real change. And the tragedy highlights deeper issues in the way our society is governed. The PREVENT programme, designed to identify and deter individuals vulnerable to radicalisation, has faced criticism for years, so it doesn't do its job. Its focus, often skewed by political narratives, appears inadequate in addressing diverse threats. And if Rudakabana's case was noted in ideology, but his obsession was with violence was noted and not acted upon, an area PREVENT seems ill-equipped to handle this obsession, this interest, this passion for evil. And the interagency communication was glaringly absent. Police, social service, the PREVENT, all of these organisations operating independently, failing to share critical information. Rudakabana's history of knife possession, violent behaviour, his fascination with violent material, culminating in the purchase of castor beans to produce ricin, should have triggered a multi-agency response. And there's lots of hindsight here, but the point is, the system knew there was something wrong, and the forthcoming PREVENT Learning Review and proposed reforms must address these gaps. And while Yvette Cooper has promised to publish findings this week, it's imperative that these are not mere platitudes, but actionable reforms with clear accountability. And at the same time, the police created a void into which the right put its noise. So we have to broaden our perspective on extremism. Rudakabana was not motivated by ideology, but rather by a nihilistic pursuit of death and chaos. And this requires a recalibration of intervention frameworks to include individuals exhibiting signs of violent fixation outside conventional ideological markers. We're too quick to scream terrorism. We're too quick to identify people who are championing a particular cause. Rudakabana seems to have championed no cause. That is the point. He was in a vacuum. He was in a void. And a void was what encapsulated the Southport event. And that void was suddenly filled with accusations and misrepresentations, because evil begets evil. Leadership is critical in moments like these, and leadership is about giving direction rather than creating a void, further creating a void. Starmer and Cooper may have called, or did call, for unity and reform, but rhetoric must translate into action, and it should happen. It should have happened in the summer, not now. The inquiry must not devolve into a bureaucratic exercise of hindsight. It needs to be a blueprint for change, ensuring better communication, proactive intervention, and expanded scope for programs like Prevent. And as Ruda awaits sentencing, the grief of the families of Bebe, Elsie, and Alice remains immeasurable. No inquiry can return their children, but it can honour their memory by ensuring that other families do not have to endure a similar horror. And their teacher and the other children who were injured during the tragedy. The Southport killings are a stark reminder that safeguarding isn't an abstract concept, but a sacred duty. It's a duty that we've failed, and it's a duty we must urgently reclaim.